The morning began like any other calm and ordinary school day. The sun had just risen over the rooftops, warming the sidewalks and making the school building glow in soft gold light. Children were arriving with colorful backpacks, some holding their parents' hands, some running excitedly toward their friends. The front yard of the school was filled with laughter, soft chatter, and the cheerful sound of kids greeting each other at the front gate. Officer Daniels stood tall in his neat uniform. Beside him was Max, his loyal German Shepherd partner. Max was not just any dog, he was a trained police canine with a sharp nose and an even sharper instinct. Every morning, the officer and Max did a gentle patrol around the school before classes began. It was part of their daily routine to make sure everything was safe. Students and teachers knew Max well. Many children liked to wave at him, and he would sometimes wag his tail back. He was loved and respected. A quiet guardian watching over everyone, Officer Daniels slowly walked along the path near the school's entrance, greeting familiar faces. He checked the parking area, the playground, and then stood near the main gate. Max moved beside him, sniffing the air with calm focus. For most of the year, these mornings were peaceful. Nothing ever happened here, and maybe that's why no one expected that day to be any different. Teachers began gathering near the front steps, welcoming their students. Among them was Mr. Collins, the math teacher. He was in his mid-40s, always wore clean shirts, and had a soft smile that made students feel comfortable around him. He had been working at the school for many years and was known for being kind and patient. Students liked him because he explained things slowly and carefully. This morning, he had a dark shoulder bag hanging over one side, just like he did every day. As the last few students walked in, Max suddenly paused. It was a small moment, so small that most people didn't even notice at first. His ears lifted slightly, and his body stiffened. Officer Daniels felt the change in Max's posture immediately. He had worked with him long enough to recognize this kind of stillness. Max wasn't wagging his tail anymore. His nose twitched as he sniffed in a specific direction. Officer Daniels followed Max's gaze. Max was staring straight at Mr. Collins at first. The officer thought maybe Max had simply caught a new scent on the teacher's clothes. It happened sometimes when someone had been around a strong smell, like cleaning chemicals or paint. But then Max let out a single low bark. Then another. Then another. His tail went stiff. His chest moved as he barked louder. Students nearby stopped what they were doing and turned their heads. A few of them whispered to each other, surprised. It wasn't common for Max to bark like this during morning arrival. "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" Officer Daniels said softly, tightening the leash just a little. But Max didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed on the teacher. He took a step forward, pulling slightly on the leash. His ears were locked, and his body language changed from calm to alert. The barking became stronger, louder, and sharper. Mr. Collins looked confused. He pointed at himself and asked, "Is he barking at me?" The students around started to giggle nervously. Some stepped back. A teacher standing nearby raised her eyebrows, unsure of what was happening. Max positioned himself between the students and the teacher. It wasn't just barking now, he was guarding. His instincts were telling him something wasn't right. Officer Daniels could feel it. Years of working with police dogs had taught him that Max didn't react this way for no reason. The officer gently guided Max to stay in position and slowly walked closer to the teacher. The principal, Mrs. Green, had just stepped outside to greet the last group of students. She saw the barking and hurried over, her face full of concern. "Officer Daniels, is everything okay?" she asked, keeping her voice calm but serious. "I'm not sure yet," he answered carefully. He didn't want to alarm the students, but Max's behavior could not be ignored. Meanwhile, more children started to gather at a distance, curious about why their friendly school dog was barking nonstop at a teacher everyone knew. Some whispered guesses to each other, while others just stared. "Max." "Hush," Officer Daniels said again, but Max didn't listen. His nose was pointed directly at Mr. Collins' shoulder bag. He circled once, then twice. Pulling gently as if wanting to get closer to the bag, Mr. Collins laughed nervously and said, "I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's my lunch or something. He's never barked at me before." The principal placed a hand on the teacher's arm and said softly, "Let's just step aside for a moment."
Oh.
The mood around the front yard began to change. A few teachers quietly guided students inside. It wasn't panic yet, but people could sense the tension building. Officer Daniels felt it too. He lowered his hand to signal Max to stay steady, but Max's tail remained stiff, his nose twitching with sharp focus. "Mr. Collins, can I ask you to set your bag down for a moment?" The officer said calmly, trying to keep the situation as normal as possible. The teacher blinked in surprise but nodded. Sure." He gently placed the dark bag on the ground near his feet. Max's reaction was instant. He leaned forward, nose low, barking again and pawing at the ground. This made everyone around pause. The principal's eyes met Officer Daniels's. She didn't have to say anything. He already understood. This was not a regular bark. Max was trained to detect specific scents that could mean danger. More teachers began ushering students into the building. A coded message was quietly sent to staff through their phones, asking them to keep children in their classrooms. Parents who were standing near the parking area noticed the shift. The happy morning chatter was now replaced by whispers, unsure glances, and worried faces. Through it all, Max remained steady and focused. He didn't wag his tail or turn away. His loyalty and training were guiding him. He knew something that humans didn't yet. Officer Daniels slowly approached the bag, but didn't touch it. His training told him to wait for backup and follow protocol. He radioed his team quietly, choosing every word carefully so students wouldn't panic inside the building. The teachers closed the doors and kept students calm, pretending it was just a normal security drill. But outside, the air felt heavy. Every sound from Max's bark to the quiet rustle of leaves seemed louder than usual. Mr. Collins stood frozen, still confused and saying softly, "I don't know what's happening. It's just my work bag." The principal placed a hand on his shoulder and gently moved him a few steps away from the students. The school security guard joined them. Officer Daniels knelt slightly, holding Max's leash with firm hands. He knew Max wouldn't behave like this unless his instincts were picking up something serious. He whispered to his partner, "Good boy, Max. Stay with me." In that moment, no one truly knew what the dog had detected, but everyone could feel that something unusual was unfolding right there at the front gate of a school where nothing like this had ever happened before. What had started as a cheerful, sunny morning was now slowly turning into a moment everyone would remember. Max had sensed something, and his non-stop barking was just the beginning. The calm atmosphere of the school was about to change forever. The moment Max barked at the teacher's bag, everything around the school entrance shifted quietly but clearly. What had started as a bright and peaceful morning was now slowly turning into something tense. Students who were laughing seconds ago now fell silent. Some of them whispered to their friends. Others stood frozen, looking at the barking dog with wide eyes. Max's voice echoed through the front yard, sharp and deep. Like a sound that carried a message no one fully understood yet. Officer Daniels held the leash firmly, feeling Max's weight pulling forward. The dog's body was tense, his ears locked, his tail still. Years of experience told the officer this was not excitement. This was a warning. Max's instincts were too sharp to ignore. "Max, easy," Daniels whispered, though he knew the dog wouldn't calm down until whatever he sensed was addressed. The principal. Mrs. Green took a small step back as she scanned the situation. She saw the teacher, Mr. Collins, standing awkwardly with his bag at his feet, looking confused. She saw students at the gate, unsure whether to go inside or stay. She saw other teachers exchanging uncertain glances. And she saw Max not barking like a playful dog, but guarding like a silent wall. "Mr. Collins," Officer Daniels said calmly, "we're going to need to step aside for a moment." "Of course," the teacher replied quickly, raising both hands slightly as if to show he meant no trouble. His voice shook just a little. Daniels nodded too. "Mrs. Green." She immediately turned to one of the assistant teachers and said in a quiet but firm voice, "Get the students inside." The assistant didn't ask questions. She gently guided a group of children away from the entrance, saying, "All right, kids, let's get to class." Quickly and quietly now. Some students looked back over their shoulders, whispering, "Why is Max barking like that?" One little boy even asked, "Is Mr. Collins in trouble?" The teacher didn't answer. She just placed her hand on his shoulder and guided him forward. Within minutes, the front of the school began to clear. Most students were already in their classrooms. Hallway doors were closed. The laughter and noise from earlier had turned into a strange silence, broken only by Max's nonstop barking. The school secretary, standing at the office window, picked up the intercom microphone. Her voice came through the speakers in calm, clear tones. "Teachers, please stay inside your classrooms with your students. Do not open your doors unless instructed. This is a precautionary measure." Officer Daniels took a careful step closer to Mr. Collins. "Sir, I need you to remain calm and stay right here. I also need to take a closer look at your bag." The teacher shifted his weight from one foot to another. His face was pale. "It's just my work stuff," he said nervously. "I swear. I don't understand why the dog is acting like this." Max continued to bark. Not at the teacher himself, but at the bag. Every bark felt controlled and pointed, not wild. Behind Daniels, 2 more officers arrived at the gate. They had been close by on patrol. Seeing Max in this state, they didn't need much explanation. They quickly blocked off the main gate and quietly moved parents, who were still standing in the parking area a few meters back. "Everything okay?" one of them asked in a low voice. "Not yet," Daniels replied. Keeping his eyes on Max, he's locked onto the teacher's bag. Mrs. Green's heart was pounding, but she tried to stay composed. She knew she had to keep things calm for the students' sake. "We should follow lockdown protocol," she said quietly to the officer. "Already happening," Daniels replied, glancing at the other officers, who were now radioing in for support. Mr. Collins was still standing awkwardly, holding his hands together. "This must be a mistake. I don't know what's going on. I've never even had a problem like this before," he muttered, his voice shaking slightly. Max suddenly stopped barking. He leaned forward, nose twitching rapidly, sniffing the air around the bag. Then he let out a low growl. Not a loud bark this time, but a deep, vibrating warning sound. That was enough. Daniels made a quick hand signal. One of the officers gently took the teacher by the arm and led him away from the students and school doors. Not rough, just careful. At the same time, the principal pulled out her phone and sent a message to all staff. "Lockdown, follow drill procedure. Stay calm." Inside the classrooms, teachers lowered their blinds. Some kids whispered nervously, not fully understanding. Others looked up at their teachers, waiting for answers. The teachers didn't say much. They just smiled softly and said, "It's just a drill. Stay quiet." Outside, parents were starting to gather near the fence. A few of them called out, asking what was happening. The arriving officers calmly told them to move back and stay clear. One of the parents, holding a small child, said, "Why are there so many police here? What's going on?" But no one gave details yet. Max circled the bag once more, then sat down beside it. That was his signal, his way of telling Officer Daniels, "Something's here." Daniels reached for his radio. "We need backup at the front entrance. K9 has signaled." His voice was steady, but inside. His mind was already running through every safety step he had learned in his training. Another team arrived within minutes. One officer carefully moved the students who were still arriving late to a side entrance far away from the scene. Another officer positioned a barrier at the road. The principal's assistant, standing near the door, looked frightened but tried to stay strong. "Do you think it's something dangerous?" She whispered to Mrs. Green. "I don't know," the principal replied softly. But Max has never been wrong before. The teacher, Mr. Collins, looked down at the bag sitting on the ground. His forehead was covered in sweat now. He rubbed his palms together nervously. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble," he whispered, but no one responded. Daniels didn't take his eyes off the bag. He slowly pulled Max back a few steps to give the incoming security team space. Max didn't resist, but kept staring at the dark bag like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. An explosive detection specialist from the local police was already on the way. In situations like this, every second mattered. Meanwhile, The school building was fully under lockdown. All doors were locked. Hallways were empty. Students sat on the floor inside classrooms, whispering to each other. A few teachers turned on soft music to keep them calm. A little girl in one classroom whispered, "Why is Max barking? He never barks like that." Her teacher smiled softly, even though her hands were shaking under the desk. "It's okay. He's just doing his job." Outside, Officer Daniels took a deep breath. He had seen Max act like this before, and those times the dog had always been right. Whether it was a dangerous item or a hidden scent, Max's nose had never failed. Another officer quietly approached Daniels and asked, "Do you think this is real?" "I don't know yet," Daniels replied, "but we trust the dog." As they waited for the specialist, the barking had already spread an invisible wave of alertness through the entire school. One loyal dog's instincts had made dozens of people move fast, think clearly, and prepare for the unknown. Max shifted slightly on his paws, letting out another low growl. He was not going to relax until the danger was found, door proven safe. The school stood quiet behind locked doors. The parents watched from a distance, the officers surrounded the entrance. And at the center of it all was one bag on the ground, and one dog who refused to ignore what he smelled. The peaceful morning had officially turned into an emergency. Everyone was waiting to find out what Max had sensed. The air around the school entrance grew heavy. The bright sunlight still touched the red bricks of the building, but the mood had completely changed. It wasn't a normal morning anymore. It was quiet, tense, and serious. A few minutes ago, children had been laughing and skipping through the gate. Now no one stood there except officers, the principal, Mr. Collins, and Max, the German shepherd whose sharp instincts had started it all. Max sat on his hind legs, but stayed alert. His ears were straight, and his eyes didn't leave the dark shoulder bag lying on the ground. Every breath he took was sharp and focused, as if the scent from that bag was pulling him closer. Officer Daniels stood beside him, holding the leash tightly but gently. He had worked with Max for years and could read every signal in the dog's body language. Max wasn't confused. He wasn't unsure. He was absolutely focused. Inside the school building, every classroom door was locked. Students sat on the floor or at their desks, while teachers tried to keep their voices calm. Some kids thought it was a drill. Others felt something was different this time. The teachers kept giving reassuring smiles, even though they themselves were uneasy. The intercom had gone silent. No bells rang. It was just waiting. Outside, 2 more police cars arrived quietly. The officers stepped out, not rushing, but moving with careful purpose. One of them carried a special detection kit. Another walked straight toward Daniels. "Where's the bag?" the officer asked in a low voice. "Right here," Daniels replied. Nodding toward the dark bag on the ground, Max let out another low growl. Not loud, just enough to say, "Don't ignore this." The officer looked at Max and nodded slowly. "He's serious." Mrs. Green, the principal, stood near the door with her hands pressed together tightly. Her heart was pounding, but she stayed steady. She knew the students inside were counting on her to be calm. She whispered to the officer beside her, "All classrooms are locked. All teachers confirm safety." "Good," he said. "We'll keep it that way until this is over." Meanwhile, Mr. Collins stood a few feet away, looking pale. His hand shook a little, and his shirt clung slightly to his back with sweat. "I don't understand what's happening," he said softly. "It's just a bag. My work bag. I've brought it every day for years." Daniels didn't respond to him directly. He kept his eyes on Max and the bag. In moments like these, he trusted the dog more than anything. Another officer carefully put on gloves and slowly approached the bag. Everyone around took a step back. Even though they didn't know what was inside, they couldn't take chances. Max suddenly leaned forward and barked twice. Short, strong barks that made everyone freeze. Daniels whispered, "Easy, Max. Easy." But he knew exactly what those barks meant. Max wanted distance. The officer stopped moving closer and looked at Daniels for guidance. Daniels nodded slowly, signaling him to wait. A bomb detection specialist arrived moments later. He wore a protective vest and carried specialized equipment. His calm voice filled the silence. "All right. Let's see what we have here." He placed a small scanner on the ground, letting it slowly roll toward the bag. The quiet hum of the device seemed louder than anything else around. Max didn't take his eyes off it. Inside the building, children peeked out through small openings in the blinds. One boy whispered to his friend, "Do you think it's a bomb?" The teacher gently tapped the desk to get his attention. "We don't guess," she said softly. "We just stay calm and safe. That's all." In the hallway, the sound of boots moved carefully. Police officers were positioned near every door. No one was allowed to enter or leave. The school had gone into full safety mode. Outside, the specialist looked at the small screen of his device. He didn't say anything at first. He just gave a small hand signal to the officers around him. That was enough. The area was cleared even further. Parents who were still outside were pushed back another 50 feet. Mrs. Green took a deep breath. She could see the serious faces of the officers. She wasn't told anything yet, but she didn't need words. She could read it in their expressions. Max barked again, loud and firm, his paws pressing into the ground. Daniels could feel the tension in the leash. Max wanted to protect. That was what he was trained for. That was who he was. One of the officers gently guided Mr. Collins further away from the bag. The teacher raised his hand slightly, panicked. "I didn't do anything," he said. "It's just my bag. Please." "We understand, sir," the officer said in a calm voice. "But for everyone's safety, we have to check everything carefully." The specialist kneeled near the bag but didn't touch it yet. He used a small tool to carefully open the top flap. The officers held their breath. Daniels held Max steady. Max let out a low, long growl as the bag shifted open. A few seconds passed, but those seconds felt like minutes. The specialist reached inside slowly, pulling out a thick cloth jacket, a few notebooks, and then paused. He carefully lifted a small black case that had been tucked inside. The shape of it was unusual. The officer placed it on the ground beside the scanner. Daniels immediately saw Max's reaction. Max barked again and pulled forward hard, nose twitching. That was enough. "Everyone back," the specialist said firmly. Even though no one shouted, the energy in the air grew sharper. The principal stepped back to the school door. Parents were moved even farther behind the barrier. The specialist carefully opened the small case. Inside, there was something unexpected. It wasn't explosive, but it was something that should not have been brought to a school under any condition. It had a strong scent that Max was trained to detect. Daniels exhaled slowly. "Good boy," he whispered. The specialist gave a shorthand signal to the team. It meant the item was secured, but dangerous enough to explain Max's reaction. Inside the school, the intercom remained silent. Students didn't know what was happening. The teachers could feel something important was going on outside. An officer leaned over to Daniels and said quietly, "Got it." He was right again. Daniels looked down at Max, who was finally relaxing a little, his tail lowering. The dog had done his job perfectly. He had felt something long before anyone else did. Meanwhile, Mr. Collins stood frozen. His face was pale, his breathing uneven. He didn't speak. One of the officers gently placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Sir, we're going to ask you some questions. Please stay calm and cooperate." The principal quietly stepped back into the school building. She went to her office and picked up the phone to update the district. Her hands were still shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. "Yes, lockdown is still active. Yes, the situation is being handled. The students are safe." Outside, the specialist carefully packed the case into a secured container and carried it to the van parked near the gate. No one rushed, but every movement was deliberate and serious. Parents tried to ask questions from behind the barrier, but the officers kept their answers short and calm. "The situation is under control," they repeated. Officer Daniels crouched down to Max's level, rubbing the dog's head gently. "You did good, buddy. Real good," he whispered. Max wagged his tail just a little, finally relaxing, but it wasn't over yet. Even though the dangerous item had been found, the The school had to stay locked down until the building was fully cleared and confirmed safe. The officers formed small teams to walk through the halls, check every corner, and make sure there were no other surprises. Inside the classroom, students whispered, "Can we go home?" Teachers gave soft answers, "Not yet. We need to wait." The atmosphere was tense but calm. Every adult was doing their best to keep children from panicking. Outside, the investigation had started. Officers gathered around Mr. Collins, asking quiet, controlled questions. He stammered as he answered, confused, shocked, and pale. Daniels didn't involve himself in the questioning. His job was to keep Max close and protect the area, and he did exactly that. The blue lights of the police cars flashed silently against the school walls. The crowd of parents behind the barriers grew larger. Some held their hands to their mouths. Others whispered prayers under their breath. And at the center of everything stood one dog, calm now, but still watchful, who had sensed something no human had noticed. His instinct had triggered a chain of safety steps that protected hundreds of children inside the school. The rising tension of the moment wasn't just about what was found. It was about how quickly everything could change, how one quiet morning could turn into a lockdown in a matter of minutes. And through it all, Max had been the first to speak, not with words, but with barks that could not be ignored. The quiet outside the school was the kind that made every small sound feel louder than usual. The wind moved softly through the trees, shaking a few leaves loose, and even that sound seemed sharp. The flashing lights from the patrol cars painted the brick walls of the school in red and blue. The parking lot, once filled with parents dropping off their kids, was now surrounded by police tape and barriers. Officers stood in place, their movements careful and serious. Max sat beside Officer Daniels, his ears still raised, his breathing steady but alert. He wasn't barking anymore, but he was watching everything with sharp focus. He had done his part, but he was not letting his guard down yet. The dark bag that had caused all this had been taken away. But everyone knew this wasn't over. Inside the school, students stayed locked in their classrooms. It had been more than an hour since the first bark. The teachers tried to keep them calm. Some read storybooks out loud, some played soft music, and some just sat quietly, holding the students' attention with steady voices. A few kids had begun to feel tired and confused, but they listened because they trusted their teachers. The principal, Mrs. Green, had moved to her office. The blinds were pulled down, and the lights were dimmed. She held a phone to her ear, speaking softly with the district office. Her hands were cold, but her voice stayed firm. "Yes, the building is still on lockdown," she said. "The police are clearing the area. No injuries. Everyone is safe. The students are calm." She hung up the phone, took a slow breath, and looked out toward the parking lot where the officers were working, outside. The specialist who had opened the bag earlier returned with 2 more officers. They were carrying a small sealed container. The dangerous item inside had been carefully secured. No one was saying what exactly it was to the crowd of worried parents standing behind the barrier. But their serious faces told enough. Mr. Collins stood a short distance away from the officers. His hands were behind his back, but he was not resisting. He looked pale and tired, as if the weight of what had happened was sinking in slowly. "I didn't mean for this," he kept whispering. "I didn't mean for this." The detective had arrived to speak with him. The conversation was quiet but firm. "We understand what you're saying, but you need to tell us everything," the detective said. "I didn't think." The teacher started, but his voice faded away. He lowered his head and stared at the ground. Max suddenly lifted his head and sniffed the air again. His ears turned slightly to the left. Officer Daniels followed his gaze immediately. Over the years, Daniels had learned something simple. If Max reacted, you paid attention. No exceptions. "What is it, boy?" Daniels whispered, tightening his hold on the leash gently. Max stood up slowly. He wasn't barking this time, but his nose was twitching rapidly. He began walking in a slow, controlled way toward the side of the building. Daniels moved with him, signaling to other officers with a wave of his hand. The small movement didn't look dramatic to outsiders, but the officers around understood what it meant. "Follow the dog." Max led them toward a row of lockers near a side door that teachers often used. His tail was stiff, his steps cautious. He sniffed around one particular locker area and gave a soft but firm growl. Daniel's heart tightened. "This isn't just one bag," he whispered. Two officers quickly moved in, blocking the hallway leading to that side entrance. The specialist returned with his scanner. He placed the small device near the metal locker. Max sat down and stared straight at the door. He had found something again, inside the classrooms. Teachers got another short message on their phones. "Remain in lockdown. Stay calm. Situation still active." This made the tension rise again quietly. Some students noticed their teacher's expression change, even though she tried to smile. A little girl whispered, "What's happening now?" The teacher took her hand gently and said, "We're safe. That's all that matters." Outside, the officers slowly cleared the area near the side entrance. Parents saw more police movement and began whispering to each other anxiously. Some tried to ask questions, but the officers at the barrier remained calm and firm. "Please stay back. The situation is under control," they repeated over and over. Back at the locker, the specialist worked carefully. The officers around him didn't speak. Daniels held Max close, but the dog's focus was sharp, his breathing steady, and his body still like a statue. Finally, the specialist used his tool to open the locker door slowly. A soft creaking sound echoed through the hallway. Inside, there was another black bag, almost identical to the one Max had barked at earlier. "Found something," the specialist said quietly. Daniels nodded. He wasn't surprised. Max had already told him in his own way. The specialist went through the same careful procedure, step by step. He scanned the bag, checked the readings, and carefully opened it. The entire hallway seemed to hold its breath. The principal stood near the entrance now, hands clutched together, watching with worried eyes. When the bag was finally opened, the specialist pulled out several items wrapped tightly inside. The officers looked at each other, then at Daniels. It was clear now this was serious. The word lockdown no longer felt like a drill. It was real. The detective, who had been talking to Mr. Collins, stepped forward quickly. His tone changed. "This just got a lot more serious," he said to his team. More officers arrived, forming a tighter circle around the area. The specialist carefully secured the second bag just like the first one. Max wagged his tail slightly as if to say, "I told you." Daniels gave him a gentle pat on the back, but his eyes remained serious. Inside the building, teachers received a new message. "Remain calm. Continue lockdown. Do not open doors." The students could sense something was happening, even though no one told them exactly what. They whispered softly to each other. One boy near the window whispered, "Max found something again." The teacher gave a small nod, but kept her voice soft. "Yes, and that's why we have such good people keeping us safe." Meanwhile, outside, the district superintendent had arrived. He spoke quietly with Mrs. Green and the officers. "Is everyone safe?" He asked. "Yes," she replied. "All students are accounted for. No injuries." "Good," he said, breathing out slowly. "We'll need to prepare to communicate with parents soon." The officers were working quickly, but with control. Everything Max had discovered changed how they looked at the situation. This wasn't just about one bag anymore. It was something bigger. A helicopter hovered far above, its soft hum barely audible but noticeable. News of the lockdown was already spreading beyond the school grounds. Daniels crouched next to Max again, whispering, "You're saving lives, boy." Max tilted his head slightly, then returned to watching the hallway. After another 30 minutes of careful checking, the specialist finally gave the signal that the second bag had been secured. The team began sweeping the entire perimeter, leaving no corner unchecked. Max helped, sniffing around every door, every locker, every trash bin, moving with quiet confidence. Each time Max sniffed and walked past without reacting, Daniels felt a little more relief. Each time Max paused, officers followed. It was a silent language between man and dog, one built on trust. The principal walked through the hallway with the district official behind her. Her face was pale but determined. "I want every student safe. That's all that matters," she said softly. And they were. Locked in classrooms, holding hands with friends, whispering questions. But safe. Outside, the sky began to change colors slightly. It wasn't early morning anymore. Time had passed quickly without anyone noticing. The specialist gave a final signal. No more bags found. Area is secure. Relief spread slowly but carefully. This didn't mean it was all over, but it meant the immediate danger had been controlled. The officers began slowly lifting the outer barriers. Parents leaned forward, anxious for news. Max finally sat down beside Daniel's, tail gently wagging, tongue hanging slightly out of his mouth. His job wasn't finished, but the heaviest part was done. Inside, the lockdown was still in place, but teachers could sense a shift. The tension in the air wasn't as heavy as before. Students were tired but calm. One teacher whispered to another, "That dog saved us." And she was right. The school had gone from a quiet morning to a lockdown. From uncertainty to action, all because one loyal dog trusted his instincts, and the people around him trusted him too. What happened next would bring answers. But for now, the immediate danger had been contained, and Max stood proudly like the silent hero he was. The afternoon sun was softer now, and the school grounds were no longer filled with bright laughter or busy morning chatter. Everything felt still, quiet, and a little tired. What began as a normal, cheerful school morning had stretched into hours of tension, quiet instructions, and waiting. The flashing lights of the patrol cars were still on, casting red and blue colors across the walls. But something had changed. The most dangerous part was over. Max, the German shepherd who had started it all with his sharp instincts, sat calmly beside Officer Daniels, tail resting against the ground. His job had been done well. Inside the classrooms, students remained in their lockdown positions, though some were getting restless. It had been a long time since they first heard Max barking. A little girl whispered to her friend, "Is it over yet?" Her teacher smiled softly, kneeling beside her, and said, almost, "We just need to wait for the official word." Teachers across the building were doing the same, keeping calm faces, speaking gently, hiding their own exhaustion so their students wouldn't be afraid. In the main office, Principal Mrs. Green stood near the large window that faced the school's entrance. She had been on the phone with the district office several times, giving updates. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of everything that had happened. Yes, they've secured both bags. No one was hurt. Yes, all classrooms are still under lockdown. We're waiting for final clearance, she said softly, outside. The police specialist gave the final thumbs up to the command team. The second bag had been removed safely. Every corner of the school, every hallway, locker, and door had been checked. "Area clear" came through the radios. Those two words carried a weight that made several officers breathe a little easier. Parents, who had been standing behind the barricades for hours, leaned forward, desperate for any update. A few mothers wiped tears from their eyes. Some fathers stood stiff and quiet, holding phones tightly in their hands. They didn't know the full story yet, but they knew their children were safe, and that was what mattered most to them in that moment. Detectives had moved, Mr. Collins to the side of the parking lot. He sat on a low concrete edge, head lowered, hands loosely resting on his knees. He looked exhausted, pale, and distant. A detective stood nearby, speaking to him in a calm but firm voice. "You understand how serious this is, right?" he asked. Mr. Collins nodded. Weakly, but didn't speak much. The truth behind why the dangerous items were in his possession would be fully investigated later. But for now, the focus was not on blame, it was on safety. Officers made sure everything was secure, the danger was removed. Students could be reunited with their families. Max shifted his weight and looked up at Officer Daniels. Daniels crouched down, rubbed the dog's ears gently, and whispered, "You did it, buddy. You saved them." Max wagged his tail softly, a small, tired but proud movement. Mrs. Green stepped outside to talk to the lead officer. "Can we start the release?" she asked carefully. "Yes," he said. "The danger is gone. We'll lift the lockdown slowly, one hallway at a time. We want to keep it controlled so the kids don't get scared." Mrs. Green nodded. She knew how important it was to make the ending of a tense situation calm, steady, and clear. She returned to the main office, picked up the intercom microphone, and took a deep breath. Her voice echoed through the entire building. "Attention, teachers and students. This is Mrs. Green. The lockdown has been lifted. Everyone is safe. Please stay in your classrooms until a staff member comes to release you. Everything is under control." The moment her voice ended, there was a soft wave of relief inside the school. Some students quietly clapped. A few let out long breaths they didn't even realize they'd been holding. Teachers exchanged glances. They had kept their students safe. And that mattered more than anything. The first classroom door opened just 5 minutes later. A group of young children walked out holding hands, guided carefully by their teacher. When they reached the hallway and saw the officers smiling softly at them, some kids ran forward and hugged them. One small boy pointed to Max and shouted, "That's the hero dog." Max's ears perked up as several students approached him slowly under Officer Daniel's watch. The children didn't know every detail of what had happened, but they knew this dog had done something special. They petted his fur, whispered "Good boy," and laughed for the first time in hours. Max wagged his tail gently, his eyes calm and bright. Parents were allowed in one group at a time. When the first wave of children ran out to meet their families, there were tears, hugs, and emotional smiles. Mothers bent down to hold their children tightly. Fathers lifted their kids off the ground in warm embraces. It was a moment of relief no words could fully describe. One mother held her daughter and whispered, "You're safe. That's all that matters." Mrs. Green walked around the front yard watching these reunions. Her own eyes watered, but she held her head high. "They're safe," she whispered to herself. "They're all safe." Reporters had gathered outside the police tape, but the officers kept them at a distance. For now, it wasn't about news. It was about people, parents, teachers, children, and the quiet hero with 4 legs and a golden heart. Officer Daniels knelt down again and hugged Max around the neck. "You're getting extra treats tonight," he said softly. Max leaned into him, closing his eyes for a brief moment, enjoying the quiet after so much tension. A few hours later, after the school had been fully cleared and families had returned home, the local news spread the story. People from the community came to the school gates, some with flowers and others with small handmade thank you cards from children. One little boy had drawn a picture of Max wearing a superhero cape. The next day, the school held a small assembly. The gym was filled with students, parents, and staff. A stage was set up, and in the center stood Max and Officer Daniels. When they walked in, the children clapped loudly. It wasn't a show, it was gratitude. Mrs. Green stepped up to the microphone and said, "Yesterday, something unexpected happened. But because of one loyal dog's sharp instincts and the quick response of our officers and staff, everyone went home safe. Max reminded us all of the quiet strength that protects us every day." She then placed a small gold medal around Max's collar. The gym filled with cheers and whistles. Max tilted his head, unsure of what all the noise meant, but his tail wagged happily as Officer Daniels laughed softly beside him. Children lined up afterward to give Max small cards, drawings, and gentle pats. Some hugged him softly. One shy little girl whispered, "Thank you for saving us, Max." Outside the gym, parents talked about how the lockdown could have ended very differently if Max hadn't reacted. "That dog saved my child," one father said quietly, emotion in his voice. That night, after all the noise and attention, Officer Daniels drove Max home. The streets were quiet again, the sky painted in soft colors as the sun went down. At home, Max was given his favorite meal, a warm bowl of chicken and rice. Daniels sat on the couch, Max resting his head on his knee. "You were amazing today," Daniels whispered. "You didn't just protect a building. You protected hearts, families, futures." Max didn't understand every word, but he understood the tone. He wagged his tail slowly and closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to relax completely. The story of that day spread far beyond the school. People called Max a hero. But to Daniels, he wasn't just a hero for one day. He had always been a hero, not because of fame, but because of his quiet, loyal heart. The school went back to normal in the days that followed. Children played again in the front yard. Teachers smiled. Bells rang. But now, whenever Max walked through the gate with Daniels, every child waved, and many whispered thank you as he passed. The world didn't look different from the outside. The walls were the same, the playground was the same, and the classrooms were the same. But something had changed inside people's hearts. They had witnessed how one moment of instinct, one loyal dog, and one team working together could protect an entire school. Max didn't bark that morning. He simply walked with his head high, his tail wagging gently, proud but humble as always. He didn't need medals or news stories. He just needed to be by Daniel's side, ready to protect again if the world ever needed him. And in the hearts of every child, teacher and parent from that school, Max wasn't just a dog anymore. He was their silent guardian, their hero.